Beyond the FinTech Bridge, the future of FinTech between the UK and Australia. To do that, we've got a fantastic moderator in Michael Ward, the UK Department of Business and Trade in Australia. Michael is the Strategic Director of Inward Investment. So that means it's coming here, we're getting all those pounds, going that way, all right, sort of. That's right, it's the ashes that are coming this way, Michael, but, you know, the money's going the other way. Okay, got it, the ashes. Michael currently leads the UK Government's work in Australia to attract new investment into the UK and support new financial and professional services companies entering the Australian market. And I know from previous Intersekt we've had some great conversations about those relationships. Michael has worked as a senior public servant in the UK and a senior diplomat in Australia, France, Hungary, the EU, in Brussels and Turkey. Please welcome Michael Ward to the stage as our moderator. I'm going to pick on Stuart Keane next, the Head of Community at FinTech Australia, all-round great bloke, a real go-getter. He plays the role in leading Australia's industry group in financial technology, supporting members in their participation in FinTech Australia's initiatives. Additionally, he sits within the technology team at the Australian Trade and Investment Commission. Who hasn't got a couple of different baseball caps in this space, delivering on the federal government 4-year FinTech trade investment program to support the internationalisation of the Australian FinTech sector. Please welcome Stuart Keane to the stage. Georgia Grange is the Head of New Zealand Ops at Revolut. She's an experienced product leader with a passion for FinTech innovation, currently at the helm at Revolut. She has a track record spanning FinTech digitisation of mortgages at Lendy, crafting digital employment services and VR training for the Ministry of Social Development during lockdowns. That would have been an interesting project and a great challenge, and I hope you've recovered. Working with startups, fintech firms and larger organisations including Kiwi Bank, specialising in mobile app development, multi-channel experiences, product strategy and product data. Georgia's journey has been about uplifting people's everyday finances. Please welcome her to the stage. And finally, Ali Akbarzadeh is the GM of International Product at PEXA. He's transforming the platform that powers 90% of purchases and refinancing. Think about that, in Australia's $10 trillion property market, to a global exchange giving buyers and sellers certainty, transparency and speed. For 2 decades, Ali has built and scaled great digital products for groundbreaking startups like Blix, DC Powerco, Experian, Hitwise, as well as corporate giants such as Medibank, NAB and Australia Post. Please welcome him to the stage. We can talk about dismissals perhaps, but in the meantime, let's build some bridges around FinTech between the UK and Australia. Over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Simon. And the bridge is already built. I'll come on to that in a minute. Just to, it's absolutely right that I lead some of our work on investment into the UK, but I'm here with my colleagues with 8 UK companies and potential investors in the FinTech sector into Australia. So it's very much a two-way conversation, which we're very excited about. So I brought 8 companies out, very excited about this event, which has been fantastic, and all the opportunities. UK Department of Business and Trade, we're basically similar to Austrade in terms of what we do, supporting companies moving both ways. Speaks for itself. I'm going to ask each of our panel members, if I may, starting with you, Ali, just to say, in 20 words or less if you can, what is PEXA about?
Sure, please don't count. I actually think the intro did a pretty good job. For those of you who haven't heard of PEXA, we are a world-leading platform that connects all the people that need to work together to complete property transactions, be it the lenders, the buyers, the sellers, the lawyers and the conveyancers, the state revenue officers. Just the list of people alone is probably about 50 words, but we connect them all to make the process of buying and selling property cheap, fast and certain.
Thank you. Thanks, Ali. Georgia, what are Revolut all about?
Yeah, for those of you who haven't heard of Revolut, which you've probably been living under a rock, if that's the case, but we're a financial super app that's designed for you to handle all things money in the one space, irrespective of what corner of the globe you're in.
And Stu?
Thanks for joining us,
Needs no
everyone.
introduction, of course, but
No, of course I do. So Stu Keen from FinTech Australia. Of course, we're the industry group here. We support about 400 fintechs in the market. We actually host Intersekt as well. Some people don't know that, believe it or not. But additionally, I sit within the technology team at Austrade, so the commercial arm of our federal government. So that's a role where we help a number of Australian companies, fintechs, scale overseas into markets such as the UK.
yeah, thanks, Hugh. Look, the purpose of this discussion really is to give you two companies that have made the journey across the bridge in each direction, and with Stu as one of our key collaborators on the FinTech bridge, which, as I say, is it's alive and kicking, if bridges can be alive and kicking. But anyway, it's been going well. It's existed since 2018. It's a formal agreement between governments and brings together policymakers, regulators, folk like us, Stu and myself, promoting trade and investment in both directions. And I would argue, we're the ones that really make it sing, really make things happen. So that's been going really well. Why did we do it? Well, it's pretty obvious. A huge fintech ecosystem in the UK, first or second in the world, a disproportionately big one in Australia, close links, similar problems, similar regulatory approaches. You know, what's not to like, what's not to do in terms of making this work. And it's been, I think I'm probably offend some of my colleagues elsewhere in the world, but it's been the most successful of the fintech bridges by a significant margin. And of course, you know, it doesn't stop there. We now have the free trade agreement, which came into force at the end of May this year, which is you know, a broad free trade agreement, but it's very relevant in this space because it reduces some of the friction that inevitably happens even between closely trading partners. It improves mobility. It solves some of the digital headaches will solve some of the digital headaches that get in the way of business. But really importantly, in the fintech space, it is a means through. It's not a static document. You don't sign one of these things and the world is suddenly transformed by a magic wand. It's a platform to actually make things better. Making things better in the regulatory space, so making sure existing regulation, where it's perhaps not as lined as neatly as it might be, can be through continued dialogue and interaction between our two countries, and any emerging regulation coming forward. And this is obviously a sector where regulators struggle to keep up with innovation, and so it should be. So there's a mechanism there to make sure that we get rid of some of those barriers. But leaving all that to one side, we'll come back to that a little bit later on, but that's just the context in which we're working, and we're seeing a lot of companies. We sort of stopped tracking the number of companies going across the bridge, but it's well over 100, and long may that continue. But if I may, I'd like to come on to some questions about the journey that Revolut and PEXA have been on to establish their footprint in each other's country, as it were. I know, Georgia, you're based in New Zealand, but building on the success of Revolut coming into Australia and then on the back of that going into New Zealand. So I was wondering, perhaps starting with you, Ali, could you give us a sense of that journey, and how you adapted and localized your product, which is quite disruptive in the UK context, if I may say so, to meet the market needs. What sort of surprised you on the way? What are the similarities and differences?
Thank you. We would rather describe ourselves as disruptive, more as transformative, both in Australia and the UK and any of the other markets we're considering. So for those of you who don't know some of the innards of PEXA, and if you're sort of not a lawyer or a banker, then there's no reason you should, but you should, because it's a great product. But PEXA connects everyone who, as I said at the start, needs to work together on completing a transaction together to finalise all the details, and then on the day that a property settles, in the bad old days, you had conveyances and the bank reps there at high noon, like a really bad Western, sort of one person with a title certificate, one person with the bank cheque, and then they'd swap it over. And it's a centuries-old process that really hasn't changed. And PEXA was kind of born of the idea just over 10 years ago. Well, if you're going to rebuild that process, if you're going to redesign it with, all the stuff that we have today, real-time payments and notifications and apps and a SaaS approach, what would that look like? And what it looks like is now, effectively an economic utility for Australia. As we said at the start, 90% of all transactions, property transactions in Australia go through our platform. We've, cleared, I think, over $3 trillion of property value through our payment rails. And what we don't give ourselves enough credit for, both at PEXA often and Australia as a country, is just what a success story PEXA is. It's really valuable and it's really unique in the world. Our combination of the legal framework we have here for the legal geeks out there, the Torrens title system that we have, and PEXA sort of tech layer on top, and the way it's transformed the mortgaging process and the transaction process in Australia really is world leading. We take for granted the fact that you can buy a property and know that it's yours. But in the States, there is a multi-billion-dollar title insurance industry that exists only because you can't be sure when you buy a property in the US that it is yours, or the person that you brought it from had the right to sell it to you. In the UK, 1 in 5 house moves don't happen on the day that they're meant to because there was a settlement chain issue or something happened, and something like 8% of all UK home buyers and sellers report physical ill health symptoms from their transactions. So these are all like big fundamental pains that we don't really feel in Australia because PEXA has largely solved for them. And it's taken a while for PEXA to realise that that actually isn't just valuable to Australia, that's potentially valuable to the world. And so it was just over a few years ago now that we started this international journey. And we looked around the world, we looked at countries that had similar legal systems, that had, it were easy to do business in, good market size, and we could take our IP. And the UK was our first step. So lots of back and forth, lots of in-market discovery, lots of discussions with regulators and potential customers, and lots of introspection about, when you're taking a product that's evolved over 10 years and is so integrated into a particular market and industry, when you start adapting that to the local market, well, what are you prepared to give up? What's the core kind of hard kernel of your unique value that's will be forever true in every market? And what are you prepared to tailor? And really, that's a question that every company, I think, needs to ask itself as it goes into each market.
Yeah. Thanks, Ali. And your point about the sort of painfulness of property settlement in the UK, having been through it, my kids going through it at the moment, all that. So it's a really, really high value proposition in terms of its emotional benefits, as it were. Was there anything that surprised you? And you talk about this trade-off between, what are you prepared to go, how far can you adapt? Was there anything that surprised you on that journey?
Probably one surprise and one key learning. I think for PEXA, which is it's part of the furniture effectively in Australia in the industries it serves, but it required a very different mindset for the organisation in the UK. It's hard to sort of come here as the assumed de facto tool and go into a market where you're unknown and you're knocking on doors and building network effects, and that sort of trench warfare of market adoption has been a real, it's been a real learning curve for the organisation because it's not the muscle that it had developed until that point. And it's also required a very different approach to taking our product to market. So much more reliant on partnerships and acquisitions, and much more looking at the, rather than being the central hub of the transaction flow, more just the grease in the machine and saying, what do you need? We're here to help.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we'll come on to partnerships in a minute. But turning to you, Georgia, coming the other way, can you give us a sense of how you found the journey and whether there are any particular surprises or differences that you weren't really expecting?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think going international and expanding internationally is part of Revolut's bread and butter. It was one of the things that I most admired about Revolut looking from the outside, and the ability that Revolut's had to find their product market fit time and time again. We're live in over 40 markets. We're processing over 500 million transactions a month. 500,000 businesses are on board with us, and we're onboarding, I think it's 1 million customers a month around the world. So global expansion is something that Revolut has at its core and have done very well at. For those of you who are considering going abroad, we start to look at a bit of a framework for how Revolut has done so well in that space, and the 5 kind of key steps that we've followed. First is mainly around strategic planning, and that's where you really start to lean on some of these partnerships for local nuances, which is great. So you've got to understand, like, what are the consumer needs, what are the problems, to Ali's point, and how can our product really help to solve that. We also look at local leadership, like you'll notice my accent with the New Zealand team, and we do that to make sure we've got pure local insights to keep that strategic plan in place. We also then start to look at, obviously, the local regulatory framework, really, really important to set as the foundation as we grow and scale the product. Product has obviously got to be localized, and then finally, once you've kind of got those 4 areas in check, you can start to look to scale from there, which is where it gets really exciting. When we think about our surprises and similarities, I think similarities is really the consumer need, typically underserved by the banks in terms of digital innovation and the features that customers have available to them. And then in terms of surprises, I would say the amount of margin that the banks are making on foreign exchange. New Zealand, which is obviously a much smaller market, about the 5th of Australia, in 2022 they paid over $43 million worth of just FX fees. And so if they'd done that with Revolut, it could have been free. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really powerful case. Can I move on to partnerships, as I said earlier? Look, I think for both of you, and I want to bring Stu in on it because you've got a much broader perspective, yeah, just how important part of your success in each other's markets has partnerships, establishing new partnerships, been in the success, and how do you go about finding those key partners? Perhaps start with you, Ali, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
It's an important part of your business, I know.
Yeah, I mean, I think partnerships effectively are our product. PEXA is a platform that connects all the participants in a property transaction in a particular market, and so without those integrations, without those partnerships, we effectively don't have a product, and that makes finding them relatively easy because you just go in and you find out who's involved, and then you go, knock on their doors. But that's not to say that they're necessarily the most predisposed. And so if you think about in the UK, some of our key partners are like the Bank of England. So we sort of knocked on the door of one of the oldest central banks in the world, and as a relative unknown, and said, crazy idea. We know the last time you stood up a payment scheme was, I think, 15 odd years ago for faster payments. We have done a look around the market, and we think the only way we can bring the sort of core unique value that our payment solution brings in the property transaction flows to the UK is by standing up an entirely new payment scheme. And to their credit, they said yes over a period of time. But PEXA Pay launched in the UK last year, and as I said, they're only the 7th payment scheme ever stood up. So that's just to be able to partner with what you'd perceive to be from the outset very sort of conservative or state or companies or agencies not willing to innovate. It's actually been the opposite. You just need to go in and with an open mindset. And sort of at the other end of the spectrum, ClearBank is a UK company that we depend on for access to all the other payment rails for parts of our transaction flows that don't go through PEXA Pay. And they're a great example of a digitally native cloud first API layer on top of all the existing UK payment rails. And I think without partners like ClearBank, we wouldn't have gone from sort of business case approval to first transaction on an entirely greenfield platform in the UK in just under 18 months.
Great, thank you. That's tremendous. Georgia, again, partners are really important. You're a global company, but is there an example of partnership that you've seen contribute to your success in New Zealand or Australia?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we've got multiple partnerships, and they're kind of like the cornerstone of our success, especially when we're launching internationally. It's kind of like when you're entering a new market, if you've got the good partnership set up, you're kind of jumping off the diving board rather than from the straight side of the pool. And when you're scaling, you might not have the bodies to scale the team at the same rate. And so the partnerships can really, really help to bring to light a lot of the local nuances and local insights so that you're staying really true to the strategic plan and genuinely delivering on a customer need. When I think about some of the industry partnerships that we've got a lot of value out, obviously DBT already, we've only been in New Zealand 50 days, but it's been great to work with the team there. Other industry partnerships we've had a lot of value out of is FinTech Australia, of course, and FinTech Intersekt. I can see Jason down the back there. And that's, again, really, really helpful with the local nuances and strategic side so far. And then we've obviously also got a lot in the cards and payment space as well. It'd be amiss to go without mentioning the likes of Visa and MasterCard, who obviously do a lot for us in that space as well. So absolutely integral to the success and scaling.
Yeah, thanks, Georgia. I'm glad you mentioned FinTech Australia. One of the things I've noticed, Stu, at this event is, for our 8 UK companies, just how rich an environment this is to start building some of those partnerships. And, I hear from them all the time, just how important building some of those first relationships, which hopefully then turn into partnership. Can you give us a sense from your perspective, how important you've seen building a partnerships in success, and any tips on how you go about it in this space?
It's a great question, Michael. I think it applies for FinTech Australia as well, or Austrade, and how we work with Innovate Finance, who is the industry association in the UK, or how Austrade works with the DBT. So that starts from FinTech Australia signing an MOU with Innovate Finance a number of years ago, and then kind of filters through more recently to us, with Austrade having a trade delegation over to the UK and Europe in June. You mentioned a great day earlier, which was May 31st, was actually the day that the free trade agreement between the Australian and UK government came into force. We had 14 Australian fintechs in the market in UK on that day, and we actually hosted an event, a networking event and panel discussion at level 39. For those of you who don't know it, I guess it's kind of like the Stone and Chalk over in Canary Wharf in the UK. So we had a panel discussion very similar to this with Innovate Finance, with London partners, and a number of awesome companies there. So we were with 14 Australian fintech businesses in the market there who were looking at landing and expanding their business in the UK and across continental Europe. Of course, they're earlier stage than success stories of PEXA and Revolut, and it does take a while. As a hobby, of course, I read PEXA's annual report. I think
it's a beautiful read.
Trouble sleeping, yeah.
And I think this is the first year they've recorded revenue in the UK. But of course, Ali mentioned that they started a number of years ago there. So it does take a while. Financial services or fintech, you need to go to the regulators, talk to the right people, find a group that can help you land conversations with those people, because otherwise, how do you approach the Bank of England or His Majesty's Land Registry to start launching your product? So find people you can lean on and you can network with. An example there is Austrade. Obviously has people who sit out of the High Commission in London. We have colleagues who support fintech businesses day to day, and that's Australian companies setting up their everything from understanding how to set up a company, how to get a bank account, which can actually take up to 6 months, actually up to 12 months because of some of the AML rules over in the UK. So that's a real challenge, finding the right partner for that, doing your research before it takes place, and then leaning on referrals as well where you can. I hope that addresses some of the questions.
That's great, thanks. Can I stay with you, Stu, a minute? You talked a little bit about, we work very closely together, Austrade, DBT, FinTech Australia, Innovation, Finance, and so on. And clearly we've been doing something right, at least I'd like to think so. A lot of good success, some on the panel here. And this event's another example of, the benefit of bringing trade missions out to big events like this, and you've been doing some of the other way, and we do the same. What now? What sort of areas should we carry on with the model? Is it it's not broke, so don't fix it? Should we be looking at perhaps slightly different areas, or focus? What were your thoughts on that? And when we sit down to think about what we do next, what would you be saying in that conversation?
It's been really positive to date, and there are some immediate things happening where more Australian companies will be syncing up with the British businesses, which is great. Singapore FinTech Festival is an example of that. So a group of Australian companies will be heading over there, and similarly a group of British companies, and then they'll be coming down to Australia again, which is good. It really is that connectivity, being able to meet people in person, hearing their problem statements, hearing a bit about their business. The 8 British companies that are in Melbourne today and attending Intersekt have had some positive kind of outcomes from that already. And I'm sure if you haven't already spoken with some of those companies, you now know that they're here. You would love to get around and find them. So please do that. What happens next? It's still the early stages. So it was a great federal government initiative. Austrade is delivering the FinTech Trader Investment Program. It's being delivered over 4 years, but it's potentially going to conclude on 30 June 2024. So this is the 4th out of 4 years. What that means, though, still is fintechs now know these services are available. It's a new industry, a vertical that Austrade hadn't typically supported back in the day. But now our members, FinTech Australia members, know where they can go to access that support. Similarly, if an Australian company is landing in the UK, they can go to the DBT to provide that additional kind of services, advisory. And I understand the UK DBT uses EY in the UK, so professional services support for any businesses. But for us, an industry group, FinTech Australia, puts on great initiatives, great events. We like the social side of it, getting the right people in the room and then letting the amazing innovators and founders and executives work their magic. Really, it's not about us. I know Michael's done a great job around the world for a number of years. FinTech Australia here is a supporter as well, but if it wasn't for the amazing companies doing amazing things, we'd be left empty-handed, I guess.
Yeah, no, thanks. I think that's absolutely right. Yeah, we've been getting a lot right, but we need to do more. There's more opportunity out there. It's a sector that's evolving all the time with new innovation cropping up all the time, which we just need to be absolutely on top of, and intend to do so. Yeah.
And if I could add to that as well, obviously we've spoken about the FinTech Bridge and the Free Trade Agreement. There are actually real items within there that can help you. Of course, there are bits and pieces around removal of tariffs for Australian seafood exporters selling into the UK, which might not help anyone in the room here, unless you want to eat Aussie prawns when you're travelling around the UK. Aussie prawns at a better price, I should say. But some things are around employment, mobility of people. So the youth mobility visas changes in the duration. So it was 30 years of age and 2 years. Now it's going up to 35 years of age and 3 years. Entrepreneurship and innovation visas around mobility as well. So moving your people or finding great people from whichever market to help your business, finding that tech talent, if that's what you're after, which I know a number of businesses are after as well. Certain data provisions that can make it easier to operate in a market and reciprocity on some of those rulings as well. And then what we're really pushing for, and one of the major challenges we see for fintechs overseas is obviously regulatory and licensing. So there's an encouraged dialogue between the treasuries, both Commonwealth treasuries, to work out and continue discussing how licensing frameworks can be maybe more similar. I obviously can't speak for the treasuries, but I know that the fintechs are really demanding that. If you have an AFSL here or an Australian credit licence, how can that be recognised in the UK?
Yeah.
How could it be easier for our companies going over there, starting from 50% rather than starting from day zero, as an example?
Thanks, Joe. I'm glad you brought it back to the FTA, and thanks for doing my job for me and selling the FTA. That's fantastic. We both do the same thing. But just as a very quick wrap-up question, we want to solve some of the regulatory and other barriers as we go forward. Just from Georgia and then Ali, is there one issue on your journey in terms of to success that you would like the respective governments to think about and resolve? And it doesn't matter what it is, we're taking careful notes.
Can I have two?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, first one I'd want to call out is very similar to where Stu left off around harmonisation of licensing.
Yeah.
We all know regulation is there to help keep our consumers safe and keep our industries to a really high standard, but it's also quite an unlock for innovation and getting better digital experiences into the hands of more consumers faster. So I don't think anybody in this room would disagree with me that we ever want regulation or borders to be a barrier to delivering that. So yeah, harmonisation of licensing would be one, and then super quick CDR payment initiation. I think, you know, that's been talked about a lot over the last couple of days, so I won't go deep into that, but it's really exciting. It's an unlock. It's a great experience, more transparency. New Zealand were very slow to the start line, but they're starting with that by the looks of it. So definitely would like to see the foot on the gas on those two.
Two great examples, thank you. That's great feedback. Ali, just...
I'll keep it quick and just agree with everything that's just been said. I mean, I think the things that make things easier for PEXA make things easier for any other company in this room who wants to do business in the UK. So anything that helps, you know, get people on planes to the UK easier and quicker, anything that helps get people from the UK to Australia, anything that helps address the tech skills shortage, which despite the current sort of, you know, condition of the market, I think if you look at the long-term trends, you know, we're only going to have more demand for tech workers that we just don't have, and they've got to come from somewhere. So anything that helps us, you know, just increase that mobility of people between markets and harmonisation of data protection. I mean, that's all stuff that's been said before. So you're already on that track with the free trade agreements. Just keep going is the ask.
Great answers. Thank you very much. And thank you for being such a brilliant panel. Ali, Georgia, Stu, thank you very much. And wish you, for PEXA and Revolut, all success on your continuing journey. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.